have some fun. So what's going on, everyone? I gotta make sure my audio is right. All right. So welcome to the very first Salesforce Saturday. This is basically a series where I go through and I introduce everyone to the development or basically my personal growth. I'm an administrator. I'm a Salesforce administrator. And well, that's part of my job. Part of my job is being a Salesforce admin. And I've been working in the Salesforce platform for a couple of years now. And it's really cool because there's a lot of promising things that come out of the Salesforce platform specifically for enterprise companies. And I've got a couple of videos sort of dropping in the near future around what Salesforce truly is. Salesforce, to really kind of cover it real quickly, Salesforce is a cloud-based database. It's actually a platform that has a database on it. And I can kind of show you what that looks like. But what this particular series is going to be a little bit more advanced, right? I'm not going to go directly into what the introduction to administrators, and I mean I could probably do some tips and tricks every now and again, but in reality, this entire Salesforce Saturday series is going to be going from admin to developer, and then hopefully later on down the road going from developer to architect or consultant, right? Simply for the fact that that's just the continued growth of the platform. And so, one second, I'm going to make sure I've got everything squared away here. Okay. Do I have a Salesforce document open? No, I don't. Okay. Really fast, for those that aren't really familiar with the platform or what Salesforce is, I'm going to do a very quick introduction to sort of what Salesforce is. And Salesforce is basically, like I said, it's a database. If you're not really familiar with databases, Excel is a database. So this Excel file would be considered a database. And a database is really just a collection of data, right? So it's stored in certain ways that allows you to access the data quicker and make decisions and run reports and all this other stuff. But that's really critical simply for the fact that businesses need to make data-driven decisions to run their business. And the more data they have on their business and how their business operates, the more data they have to make decisions off of. And so it gets really powerful over time the more that you use it. And so I really wanted to sort of walk into just the basics of what this is, and then moving into some of the different tools after, the different tools that Salesforce as a platform offers you, and then obviously the different tools as a developer that you would use to sort of supersede the capabilities of the declarative aspect of Salesforce. So again, it's a database. As an administrator, you would manage certain aspects of the database, like user security and sort of do some basic builds like table modification, custom fields, all of that. It's actually really not that difficult. If you want to learn about the basics of Salesforce, there's a really good, really good way to learn, and that's at trailhead.salesforce.com. This is a completely free resource. You can sign up. You can get a free. Basically, it's like a test instance. It's called a dev instance, but in reality, it's not just for developers. And you can learn the basics of Salesforce, and actually from the basics all the way through. Sorry, just got done eating, so a little bit. Anyways, I'm digesting it. So with Trailhead, you can learn basically everything that you want to learn. around Salesforce and sort of the introductory level. And like I said, this series is going to be for a little bit more the intermediate to advanced administrators moving into the development world, even some early developers, or if you're a software or a web developer and you're wanting to make a move into the Salesforce platform. The way that Salesforce is moving towards is is going to really benefit you, simply for the fact that they're moving more towards, standardized capabilities, utilizing web framework, and moving away from custom designs and custom code. So you'll be very familiar whenever we start to talk about Lightning Web Components. You'll see that simply a Lightning Web Component is comprised of a JavaScript file, HTML, and CSS. So if you're a web developer, that's basically directly in your wheelhouse. Now, you do need to understand a little bit of Apex, which is Salesforce's coding language, or it's their language to get. It's very similar to JavaScript in reality. Apex gives you access to SOQL. It gives you, basically allows you to communicate with the database. But from a graphical user interface perspective, or from a GUI perspective, you're really only dealing with, the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So if you're new to Salesforce and you want to learn more about it, I highly recommend checking out trailhead.salesforce.com. This is I have videos that are coming out soon to sort of introduce Salesforce more at a beginner's level, and I am planning an administrator or Salesforce administrator playlist, so that way I can sort of get more and more into the weeds of Salesforce. But Salesforce Saturday is going to be more for my own personal growth. So let's go ahead and get started on what I wanted to work on today, which is going over some of the tools that you'll use as a Salesforce administrator to get things done. I guess you can consider it from a development perspective, and then learning and understanding what the capabilities of those tools are and when you need to look at going away from the declarative tools in Salesforce. And what do I mean by declarative tools in Salesforce? The declarative tools in Salesforce are the tools that are built in to the Salesforce platform. And over time, they're going to continue to release more things, right? But those are as simple as validation rules. So, requiring something be done by a record or to save a record or something like that, right? So if a company came to me and says, hey, I don't want this contact to be able to be moved to closed out, and if there's no tasks, right? Somebody must at least call this person to make sure that they've followed up on them. That is a declarative rule, or not a declarative rule, it's a validation rule. So I would validate that I would create a rule, piece of code, if you will. It's very simple. It's actually a formula that just says, in order to move this person to a closed status, they must at least have X or more than one task included into it. Other declarative tools that the Salesforce platform has are going to be workflow rules. So workflow rules allow you to do if this, then that, right? So if this person or if this contact or if a contact moves from, not contacted, not accepted to accepted, trigger this platform event to happen. A lot of the time it's, workflow rules or notifications or simple field updates. But workflow rules in themselves have their own limitations. They can't access child objects or anything like that. And so that's when you start to look at the other more powerful declarative tools, such as Process Builder, right? So Process Builder is a tool that allows you to trigger use criteria on an object and say, okay, like if I was working on the account object, when an account is changed from prospect to customer, update these fields, right? And you could have them update not only the fields on the account that triggered the Process Builder to go off, but you would also be able to update related records, if you will, right? And then the limitations there is that you could only really update one related record, or there's not a lot of capabilities. And if you need more than that, that's when you start to look at workflow rules or flow, right? And I'll go ahead and log into a dev org real quick. And we'll work a little bit on that. But so flow is the most powerful declarative tool It's a visual flow, most powerful declarative tool that Salesforce offers. It's a great tool. I have come to find that 99% of the time, um, I can get what I need done in flow, utilizing a combination of custom fields, flow builder, process builder, or whatever, right? The issue that I run into a lot is that there are limitations with flow. And there are limitations with the build aspect of Salesforce in general, just the declarative capabilities in general, right? It's come a long ways over the past 2 years that I've been working on it with Salesforce, but there are still limitations there. So now, as of recent, I've started to really focus on some of the development side. So getting out of the limited scope of declarative capabilities of Salesforce and going more into the standard developer, software developer lifestyle, where you can basically have a system do whatever you want, utilizing modern day frameworks and all of that. We'll talk about some of the developer tools here in a little bit after we're done, showing some of these. But I just wanted to show you. So we have workflow actions or workflow rules that really help you or really allow you to do a lot, right? It automates the following types of actions. So you can automate task creation. You can automate email alerts, field updates, outbound messages, which are actually really powerful. You can assign follow-up tasks. You can do a whole bunch of different things. When it gets to the process builder, and there's a lot of best practices that are also involved in process builders. Generally, you have one maximum 2 process builders per object, but we don't want to get too crazy in that. You can obviously do a whole bunch of stuff, but a process builder basically is a visual representation of a platform event or an event in the database, and then you telling it what to do from that event in the database, right? I don't even know if I'm... Yeah, so I don't have any really subscribers here, so I'm kind of talking to myself, but hopefully in future this helps somebody. Okay. All right. So the process builder again allows you to look for events in the database, and when certain criteria is met, you get to run a series of actions. This is really awesome when paired with the next one that we're going to talk about, which is the flow builder, because you can trigger flows in a process builder, right? So if I go to flow and I look at some flows here, I can then create, I'm going to move this over here. There you go. Still learning this whole YouTube streaming thing, sorry. RIP. Okay. So what's really cool about the flow is that, you see a bunch of basic flows in here, and all of these flows are managed, installed. So this is a developer instance that I have here. So this is a test instance. I can basically do whatever I want here. I can test a bunch of theories, and I can practice building things. It's super, super powerful. I would love, you can basically do whatever you want. But what's really cool is that, as you see here, there are different types of flows. There are auto-launched flows, which generally are launched by an event in the database. And that could be done from a record, like a contact record being moved from one status to another. You could launch an auto-launch flow that updates a bunch of different types of, or that loops through, say, related records and pulls data. And it can get basically as creative as you want it to. There are limitations with this, specifically when you want to look at possibly doing things like custom UI events. So auto launch flows are very limited in the UIs that you can provide from a screen flow, which is the other type of flow. Or you can't really do things like delete records and the record updates are kind of limited, and that's whenever you would want to start to look at the developer or non-declarative tools. So declarative means that these are click and code, right? Or clicks code click. Yeah. So click and code allows you to basically develop things. So if you look in here, right there, it allows you to do things like a developer would do. It's just that it's using a graphical user interface to allow you to build these solutions, right? You're not hard coding solutions. You're not writing if else triggers. You're not writing Apex triggers. You're not doing anything like that. This is that's what declarative means. Declarative just means it is built into the system. And with this, basically, to be honest, you're doing a lot of developer related tasks, right? So in a screen, or for instance, if you're looking at here, if you look into the manager, so the manager is basically what manages the different aspects of the flow in question, right? So there are resources, you can pull in fields, you can create variables, there are screen components you can create, and you can utilize these. If you're familiar with the concept of object-oriented programming, which means that you build something once, instead of rebuilding it over and over and over, you just reference it in certain areas. So this is basically the declarative aspect of object-oriented programming introduced into Flow, which is really cool. But if you're familiar with programming or JavaScript or whatever, you're familiar with variables, and if you'll see that there are variables in Flow. So in reality, the more effective you get with Flow and Flow Builder, the more baseline understanding you'll have moving into the developer side of Salesforce, right? So let's just say for now that we are moving from an administrator role and we need to learn some capabilities of the Salesforce platform. There's a couple of different things that come along with that. You need to know the different tools that are available to you as a developer in Salesforce, the different aspects of the Salesforce ecosystem that have been created to support and ease the burden of learning Salesforce coding and development. And then sort of just understand the differences between what currently exists in the Salesforce ecosystem, like the differences between Aura and Lightning Web Components. Understanding what Apex is and Apex triggers, when they're used, what are test classes. And we'll go over all of that here over the course of the next couple months. But what I really want to do is just sort of start with, why would you move from declarative tools to development tools, and what is necessary to do your job, and what are some of the good resources to go to learn these additional skill sets, right? So for number one, why would you do it? Why would you move from declarative tools to development tools? That's kind of a loaded question, to be honest, because it's all really based on the skill sets of the administrator or the person that's actually thinking about pulling in some additional tool sets. I would say when you start to reach the limitations of the declarative tools, you need to start looking out at Apex, looking at Lightning Web Components. The more complex your org gets, the more necessary best practices in development are going to play into your org. And generally, even as a developer, you're going to use declarative tools in Salesforce quite often, right? There's an approach that we have to solving problems, and that is, use the tool that takes the least amount of effort, right? You want to use declarative tools when you can. Reason being is you don't have to manage those tools. You don't have to manage those builds. You don't have to worry about 3-6 months down the road having to go through and modify some Aura component to match the framework of whatever it's put in, right? When you use declarative tools, they grow with the platform. So when Salesforce releases updates to Flow Builder, your declarative tools can grow. One good example of that is that workflow rules, right? Flow Builder didn't come out until I would say about a year and a half ago, 2007 or 2017, I think it was. I don't know that off the top of my head. When did Flow Builder Start Salesforce. Let's take a look. Flow Builder release. I think it was 2018. Flow Builder release notes. I don't want to do that. So, yeah, I think it was 2018 is when Flow Builder was released. So less than, or 2 years ago. Actually, it's less than 2 years ago because I think it was winter 2018, that release. So workflow rules were traditionally used to do what Flow Builder now does, except Flow Builder has way more capabilities. And so as stated earlier, right, we use declarative tools when we can, because now Salesforce has made it very easy for you to migrate your workflow rules over to flows in Flow Builder, which is huge. And this allows you to trigger them off process builders and all this other stuff. So as what that means is, all of the work that you put in before with your workflow rules can now easily be migrated over to Flow Builder. And there's a really good Reddit post that I had saved on this. Maybe I'll post it if anybody has any questions around how to do that. There's a really good Reddit post on how to do that. But that's a reason why you use declarative tools. Also, a lot of the times declarative tools allow you to solve the problem that you're trying to solve a lot quicker, right? Using maybe just creating a custom field or a formula that just triggers an event. A good example of this is not too long ago, I needed to create a list view of records for my end users, but I wanted that list view to filter dynamically based on who was viewing it, right? I only wanted them to see their records. So instead of kind of trying to create some off the wall, code or whatever, API trigger, it doesn't really matter. What I created was a simple custom field checkbox formula that checks, that equates to true if the owner or the originator of the record equals the logged in user. And that's it. So then I could create a list view that filters on that one single field, and it's automatically dynamic. That was a very simple solution using declarative tools in Salesforce. And then you can think about how that in and of itself could obviously create some additional functionality, or you could use, Process Builder to sort of build upon that. And then obviously with workflow rules or Flow Builder, there's just a ton that you can do. And so, when would you want to start utilizing things like Apex or moving into it? I would say actually do as much research as you can on Apex and learn some of the basics of the development side of Salesforce, because you don't have to go through and set up Visual Studio Code and do a lot of things, right? I mean, if I go to a single object, say that I wanted to run a trigger off of, I don't know, an account, right? So I go to the account object, and if you look down here, there's a triggers button, right? This is one that I recently did. I created a trigger that whenever a new account was created, it assigns this new account, it creates a case on the new account and assigns that case to an intern to make sure that the account isn't a duplicate of an current existing account. Just an example. I mean, in the real world, you'd probably use some App Exchange tool to do this. Lean Data does this. A whole bunch of really good tools do this. But this was just practicing on Apex triggers. And if you've followed the Apex Academy course on Pluralsight, that's a phenomenal course, by the way. I highly recommend it. But this is one of the examples that you walk through. But you can actually create this Apex trigger in Salesforce naturally. Just by going to the object, going to triggers, I can go through and I can create a new trigger if I wanted to. Or there's also a tool here called the Developer Console. If you hit the little settings button, Developer Console, that's going to launch a console, and this is technically Salesforce's internal IDE or integrated development environment to allow you to build things, right? So I could go file new, say that I wanted an Apex trigger. You could also create Apex classes in here. You can do lightning components. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do directly in Salesforce. So the learning curve in and of itself shouldn't be that hard, right? Programming doesn't come easy to everyone. There are, if you have a background in JavaScript or if you have a background really in any language, Python, etc., you have the fundamental understanding of what programming in and of itself is. My background is I was educated in JavaScript, and I have been doing web development for years. So the HTML and CSS part of it, I'm very familiar with. The JavaScript part of it, I'm sort of regaining my training wheels on. I've never really messed with Apex, but I was able to create an Apex trigger, and I do have a background in SQL, so I was able to create an Apex trigger with really awesome, SOQL, which is Salesforce's object query language, to query the database. SOQL is very simple to SQL. It's just utilizing objects instead of tables. So if you have a background in some of this stuff, this probably will come relatively easy. So that's the why, right? We can also look at other things, talking about not necessarily the when, but what tools would you want to use to sort of get into the basics of Salesforce development. I've showed you the developer console and how you can push triggers and create triggers on objects. I recommend obviously you going to Trailhead to learn some of these things, as well as there are, LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, a whole bunch of different learning platforms that you can learn some of this stuff on. But there are standardized tool sets that developers and teams of developers in the industry use. And what's really awesome is that Salesforce has started to really adopt some of these things. Specifically, looking at Git and GitHub, looking at VS Code, and the utilization or the change from the source of truth being the org to now the source of truth being a repository has really been a huge mentality shift for Salesforce. This is something that I'm brand new to and I'm learning on. And it was really, really difficult for me to understand the different tools and how they worked together, and when you would want to use one tool to do one thing versus another tool to do another thing in the development world. But I figured if I could, I would show you exactly how I have so many things open. I would show you sort of how I have thought about the different tool sets that you would want to use outside of the standard tools that are included with Salesforce. So as an admin, you actually might be very familiar with the concept of sandboxes, right? So a sandbox is a copy of your production org in some form or fashion. There are multiple different types of sandboxes. So actually this would probably be easier if I went like this and then got rid of this and I pulled in, say you do sandbox partial, and then you have another one that could be dev, and then another one that's dev. There you go. Okay. This is me showing you how it works. There you go. From a tools perspective. Move this up a little bit, and we're so. If you're familiar as an admin, you're more than likely familiar with sandboxes. Again, sandboxes are duplicate of some form or fashion of your production org. And what that does is it allows you to sort of build things or test things in a non-production environment. Very small companies or very small admin teams or dev teams may not really use a full, partial, full copy. Full or partial copy. May not use a full or partial copy of a sandbox org. But what the benefits of having a sandbox org that's a full or partial allows you to work with real data. It allows you to work with data that is traditionally in your production org, which is very powerful because then during the UAT aspect of big builds, which is the user aided testing or user assisted testing, you can identify gaps or problems before you push it to production, and then all of a sudden you have an emergency because your Salesforce production org is down or not working because you built something that you didn't fully vet or test out. Right? As an admin, this probably happens a lot, especially in very small teams. But as you get into a bigger team, building in these dev and sandbox orgs in general become very basically required for the most part. This is actually a process called change management, and it basically allows you to manage the changes of your organization in a way that prevents you from breaking things or having it go down due to bad builds, due to bad code, all this other stuff. As a developer, you have different tools like GitHub, which sort of completely blow sandboxes out of the water and how they work and the management of the version control and management of your code. But if you think about it, right, what you're pushing from one instance, from your dev instance to your partial copy to test, that could be things like custom objects that you've built out, custom fields, workflow rules, approval processes, all of that stuff can be pushed from one org to another. And then you test it out, you make sure everything works. And then via a change set, which is another declarative tool, if you will, or a tool that Salesforce has out of the box that allows you to bundle things together and push them to a production organization instead of having to rebuild everything from scratch. So as an admin, you're probably used to that. But when you move into the world of development, it starts to become a little bit more confusing, because now, since they have implemented support for VS Code, and since there's like a big change of focusing on the source of truth being your production or your org, and now the source of truth is your repository, you have to readjust your mentality here, right? It's an additional layer of things that you need to know. And if you think about code in general, or developers work with a lot of the back end aspects of a platform or of a application, or in this case of a Salesforce organization. Developers have to think about metadata and all of these other things. And what's really cool is that now Salesforce is, what they're saying is becoming metadata aware, which means that the data of data knows about itself and sort of can do things in a fashion that normal data just could do. That is a whole different conversation, but it's super, super interesting that whenever I started, as an admin, I became very, very comfortable with all of the declarative tools. I sort of maxed out my capabilities of, I'm not going to say I know everything about Salesforce. That's almost impossible. It's extremely, extremely in-depth. But as an admin, I could basically solve any problem that a declarative tool could do. I could do it, or I can, in some form or fashion, and it doesn't take that much research. But when that happens, naturally I start to look, or one would look at the additional functionality required to sort of go beyond that. And for me, that was getting into the development side of things. When I did that, I opened a can of worms that I was not ready for. I was not ready to, I did not understand what Git and GitHub repositories were. I had been introduced to them previously, but I didn't really have a thorough understanding of how they operated, or even how they played into the daily work of a Salesforce developer. I also was not familiar with VS Code. If you know anything about, I would say, programming IDEs, you would know that VS Code is very young, right? It's only been out for about 3 years. I mean, but it is the staple IDE because it's really lean. It is, it's got a lot of benefits. I'm not going to go too far into them because I'm not that familiar with it, but it's got a lot of benefits over everything else that has come out so far, especially when it comes down to Salesforce development, because Salesforce's team in and of itself uses VS Code. They have built an entire plugin system for VS Code, so it makes it very easy for you to develop things for the Salesforce platform using what they have. It's called linting and all this other stuff. So VS Code is the IDE in which you do your work, if you will. And then there's this concept of scratch orgs. So this sort of threw me for a loop. You have sandboxes. Sandboxes are generally used to test functionality, I would say. Functionality builds utilizing declarative tools in Salesforce. But now you have scratch orgs, which you can create from it's basically a very, very temporary dev org that you push code to real time to test things. If you've ever worked in, like, say, Adobe's suite, and you have your tools on one side and your view screen on the right hand side, so whenever you make a change on the left, you get to view it on the right. That's sort of what a scratch org does for VS Code or Salesforce development, if you will. You sort of get to push changes to your scratch org, make sure that they work, all of that other stuff. And then whenever you've identified that what you've built, whether it's a lightning component, whether it's an Apex trigger, whether it's an Apex class, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, whatever you've built, you push it to your scratch org. It allows you to do a little bit of real quick UAT, allows you to view it in real time. That is that's sort of what scratch orgs are for. So in this case, I'll sort of explain it, and I'm probably not doing a very good job of this, but I'll try to explain the different tools and how you would use them and when you would use them and the whys, right? So what I have here is VS Code. Okay. So I'm going to get rid of all this because these are some different things that we don't really need to chat about. So this is VS Code. I'm going to take a drink. VS Code is my IDE. It's my integrated development environment, meaning that I get to do or build things in this program, and it has some benefits to me. Again, like linting, which helps me finish my sentences, or it's a system that basically allows you to, when you've created a variable in one place, understand that it's an available variable to reference in another place, and sort of helps you finish those things, right? There's also if you look here, where is this here? There's also a really awesome extension system for VS Code. And there are, if you see here, the CLI integration, which is Salesforce's command line interface, which is sort of the push and pull system from Salesforce, if you will. You have to have your command line interface installed prior to installing the plugin for VS Code, because what happens is your Salesforce org, or the platform in and of itself, uses a command line interface to manage things like package push and pulls to production orgs or orgs, and you can't push and pull code to a production org, but push and pulls to organizations in general, whether it's a dev org, or not. Your command line interface then gets installed on your computer. When you install VS Code, you can install the command line interface extension, which is included in the Salesforce extension pack, so you only really have to install one pack to really get up and running with Salesforce. But what that does is it allows your VS Code to communicate directly with Salesforce's platform. And then your Salesforce extension pack is really great. This gives you some Apex, some basic, your Salesforce CLI integration, Lightning Web Components, all of the things that you would do and build in Salesforce. This really, really helps you with that. I highly recommend checking it out. It has saved me a lot. It allows me to, see real time what the status of my test cases are. You can run a whole bunch of stuff directly inside of your IDE with the Salesforce extension pack. So I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. In reality, to get started from a brand new dev instance, download. First of all, there's a Trailhead course on this, which is really good, which is what I followed. But you'd want to download VS Code. You'd want to install Salesforce's CLI integration, or Salesforce's CLI, and then once you install the Salesforce CLI, you can come in here and install the Salesforce extension pack, and you're almost ready to get to go. Actually, you would be ready if you're a solo developer for a company, or you just want to develop for your own I guess, happiness and practice, you really don't need Git and GitHub. Git and GitHub are more for version control, right? So let's go ahead and get into sort of Git and GitHub. This is, again, something that I'm sort of really trying to wrap my head around, and get, I'm brand new to it. But basically what happens is in VS Code, you have a repository. So all of this on the left-hand side, these are all my documents. These are all my, I would say, so if you go here, my classes, as you'll see, this is a controller class. If I wanted to open up, triggers, I could, pull up my AP or my Apex triggers. So this right here is a folder that's structured with a bunch of other folders inside of it that really help break out and organize your code, right? So if I have a Lightning Web Components, I have an account priorities component here. And this allows me to look at all my different Lightning Web Components that I'm working on, or my different classes that I'm working on, or if I'm building Aura components, etc. Right? In the world of development, this is called a repository or a project, right? Projects would be stored in repositories. And a repository is really just it's a vault for your code. And the great thing about Git and GitHub is that when you have different, there's actually a really great video I watched on this today by a guy named, or not by a guy, by, I don't want to go to trending. I meant to go to history. Let's see who this is by. Fireship. Fireship has a phenomenal video on Git explained in 100 seconds. It's this. Where is it at? Here you go. Watch this video, Git explained in 100 seconds. Basically what he goes into is Git is a program that allows you to control versions of documents or groups of documents. GitHub is where you can store these versions, right? And you then would have what's called a master version, which is like the most up-to-date version. You can copy the entire program, pull it off, make changes, test those changes, and then push it back to the master once they're completely tested. What this allows you to do is when you think about working with a team of developers, you have one person working. So you have your master, right? Your master node, if you will. It's called the head, right? So master. You have your master, or the head of the program. And this contains the most up-to-date, latest version of the code. And instead of making changes to the master and then pushing them over to a new version, right, that's called linear development, basically. The reality is a lot of times you have multiple people working on a program, right? So you have one person that could be working on a program and then making changes, and then you have another person that's working on a whole different part of the program making changes, or in this case, code. And then another person working on another part of the program. And instead of making all these changes real time, what you do is you would basically do what's called a branch. You would branch off of your master, and I would, person one, I would work on my code here. Person two, I'd work on my code here. Person three. And the goal for branches are to be as small as possible, right? So you want to make as small of changes as possible, because you don't want to make a lot of changes and then person two make a lot of changes. And then when you go to branch your code or merge your code back, right, you want to make sure that they're still compatible. And so this gets into the methodology of continuous development and continuous implementation. Continuous implementation or continuous development allows you to continually work on your code, right? And continually to make necessary changes very quickly. So this is sort of like, I wouldn't say agile, but this is a very quick resolution, allows you to grow your program very fast. And so GitHub basically is a system, an online solution to storing the master, or to doing this. What's really cool is that if you go to GitHub, I'm just going to just show you here real quick. GitHub basically allows you to push changes, to manage changes and all of that. So you can create groups or teams that work out of the same repository, and you have different tabs here that help you communicate or collaborate with your team. You have the code tab that shows you all of the different files in your repository, or all the different codes or programs in your repository. This is really important because this allows people to clone or download copies of the program, right? You have issues, which are really just like, if you've ever been to an online forum, these allow you to communicate, just create like a new post and collaborate or communicate different things about the program. You have pull requests. So when you make changes, so say that I branched out, I created a branch of the program, and I made some changes. Say that I made changes, or I just filled out the README file. What then I would do is I would commit those changes to the branch, and then I would create a pull request, which is a request to pull my committed changes into the master program. With a pull request, it allows you to compare the code. So what's really awesome is if I was working with 2 or 3 other developers, I could edit the README file and just fill it all out. And then I could commit those changes. I could create a pull request, and then I could collaborate on those changes. And this allows people to do things like code reviews. It allows people to do things like, you can also run tests on the pulls. You can basically, you can run functional tests to make sure that what the committed changes are not going to break the production code. That's done with actions, which are automated actions in GitHub, that you get to do. You can obviously manage your different projects. The wiki allows you to create sort of the to-dos of, or it's like a Wikipedia for this particular repository. It's the easiest way to put it. You can manage the security of your repository. You can look at how many pushes or merged pull requests, how many issues or closed issues there are, and then your settings. So GitHub allows you to manage the different versions of your program, right? That Git pushes. Git is the version control. GitHub is sort of the repository that stores it all. I know that's crazy amounts of information, but I had the biggest problem trying to find and figure out how all of this worked together. And it took me like a week. I'm starving. All right. Now that's the tools. There are some really great resources for all of this. There are GitHub repositories that are open source. So GitHub repositories in general are open source, but there are GitHub repositories that allow you to walk through the wiki of different, builds or whatever. There's really great GitHub, like introduction to Git and GitHub repositories. There are really great courses on Trailhead for Git and GitHub. And those are free, by the way, so you can check those out. If I went to trailhead.com, I can just search for Git and GitHub basics. So there you go. I've already taken this one. This walks you through basically everything. It also helps you install the system, right? There is a really great quick start Visual Studio Code for Salesforce development. This helps you get your IDE set up. So you can check that out. And again, all this is free, so you don't have to worry about it if you are watching this and you're worried about having to pay for things. There are paid services that you can go to for really great courses. Like I think the staple course to learn Apex is called Apex Academy by a guy named, I don't want to butcher his name or I forget it, but let's look here. Apex Academy. I've watched I've done like 10 courses this month, because actually, so Pluralsight is free right now for the month of April. As this video is being streamed, Pluralsight is free. So you can sign up for free for Pluralsight. And if you're wanting to get into like really get into a bunch of different things, they have phenomenal courses on Salesforce. Apex Academy by David Liu. This absolute beginner's guide to coding in Salesforce. This is a phenomenal course to learn Apex coding, as well as there is a series called Play by Play, which walks through real world scenarios utilizing in different functionality of the Salesforce system. This is generally by a guy named Don. Don. Let's see if he's up here. Don Robbins. So Don Robbins is I think he's like a 20 times certified Salesforce professional, which is crazy. But he has a lot of phenomenal courses on here that are play-by-plays. These walk through real-world scenarios. This is sort of where I got the idea for my Salesforce Saturdays, because in here he consults with professionals, like people who have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for tens of years. So, people that have been doing development or architectures, or like 10 times certified architects or consultants, right? I'm a certified Salesforce administrator. I don't even have my platform app builder yet. But as I learn, you're going to get to learn with these Salesforce Saturdays. That's what I'm trying to do, is sort of do something similar to this play-by-play, but in a more realistic scenario that people who are new to the concept can learn with me, right? The biggest thing is, again, trying to learn the different tool sets and how they worked together. I actually reached out to the dev environment or the dev community in Discord, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out the Discord channel, SF Exchange Discord, it's a great resource for all certified Salesforce professionals. They have everything from administrators to developers to architects to consultants. You can learn so much there. They do a phenomenal job at summarizing release notes. So if you want to sort of maintain, be as up to date as possible on all the information, that is a great way, a really great way to do it. Okay. Alrighty then. So let's go ahead and sort of continue on here. Man, I literally have so many things open. Oh yeah, so get explained in 100 seconds. Check that out for sure. Good, I'm not dropping any frames. All right. So that's the introduction to the tools. Okay. It's also an introduction to some of the resources that are out there. There's the developer hub on Salesforce. So I would highly recommend checking out. I don't need this. All right. Developer.salesforce.com. This really allows you to look at, the different aspects of everything that you're going to need to know. But today we're going to talk about the Lightning components, right? So really looking at Lightning Web Components. Lightning Web Components is rather new in Salesforce. And again, I'm not a professional or an expert on this. This is what I've learned over the past 2 weeks, or past 2 weeks. Lightning Web Components are rather new. The reason that they're rather new is because in 2014, when Salesforce started building out their, front-end user interface capabilities, they went and they built Aura. Aura is now known as Lightning Components, or Aura Components. Aura is a custom... It's basically a language, if you will. It uses a combination of Apex, JavaScript, but it's very different, right? The reason that Salesforce did not do or use Lightning Web Components in 2014 was, first of all, the capabilities of the W3C, which are W3C, forget what that's worth, Worldwide Web Consortium, which is the organization that basically manages the standards of the web, right? The capabilities the W3C had set forth in 2014 were rather limited, meaning that there weren't that many great standardized, there wasn't much standardized functionality of the internet that had been adopted by large corporations. The reason, and what I mean by that is that Worldwide Web Consortium can come out and say whatever they want. They can build some standards and sort of bridge, look for functionality. But if companies that build web browsers like Google, Firefox, and Safari, if Internet Explorer, if they don't adopt the standards of the W3C, it doesn't really matter. Simply for the fact that those are the web browsers that people use all the time. Right? And when we're looking at user or front end aspects of development, we're looking at how things render in a web browser. So we have to understand how the web browser works and how the web browser interacts with the back end aspect of the code. So in 2014, when Salesforce is bridging the gap between Classic and Lightning and sort of rolling this out, they built Aura. Well, not too long ago, actually late 2019, I think it was. It's Lightning Web Component release date, February 2019. So in February of 2019, Lightning Web Components were released. And what they did is they moved away from the custom code aspect of Aura, and they moved more towards the standardized aspect of the web, right? So inclusive of W3C is the JavaScript documentation. I forget where this is, but JavaScript is actually called something else. JavaScript ES6. Okay. So JavaScript is sort of what communicates from, or what bridges the gap between the data and the user interface, or the rendered user interface. And JavaScript is managed by not a company, it's by an organization called ECMA Script, or that actually stands for European Computer Markup Standard Language, ECMA International, European Computer Manufacturers Association. So what's really cool is Salesforce is actually a part of both the W3C and the ECMA. So they are up to date on the most, they're included on the most up-to-date JavaScript functionality as well as the most up-to-date web standards, which is why they're moving more towards Lightning. However, long story short, you need to understand a little bit of the JavaScript and why. And so the difference between Aura includes now more JavaScript and HTML and CSS, moving away from the custom development side. So what this allows, actually what this really does is it allows Salesforce to create templatized components, if you will, utilizing HTML. So in here, as you'll see, is I am in the component reference, and what this actually allows me to do is they can build standard components utilizing, if you're familiar with HTML and CSS, HTML is the body of sort of the web, CSS is the styling of that body, and then JavaScript is sort of what happens when it's the engine, right? Normally, you would have to build your CSS from scratch. So you would have to tell the web browser how to render the body of a website. But with standards now, which is what's really cool about this, is that Salesforce can now give you predefined standards for the classes that your HTML comes in, and allows you to not have to worry so much about the CSS or the look and feel, but just really worry about the JavaScript functionality of whatever you're trying to build. And on top of that, they give you a framework to work out of, utilizing some predefined or, sort of the component reference that you're going to see here, as well as the Lightning Design System. Right? The Lightning Design System is the CSS explainer, if you will. You can also look at component blueprints and all this. This is kind of all over the place, but If you have any questions about any of this, is always going to be, first of all, developer.salesforce.com. This right here, the developer guide, walks you through all of it. It basically tells you everything that you need to know about Lightning Web Components, how they work, how to communicate with Salesforce data, user experience, Aura coexistence, how Lightning Web Components and Aura sort of coexist on the same platform or in the same org, and all of this other stuff, debugging it, everything. Everything that you need to know about Lightning Web Components is literally right here. But if you don't feel like reading through all that, you can go ahead and check out my videos, because that's sort of what I plan to do. Cool. So Lightning Web Components, that's what they are realistically. If you have not noticed yet, and maybe I need to pull up another screen here. I don't want to do that. Untitled document. Is it here? No. Down Robbins. Boom, boom. I wish I knew if I could play audio. If I could play music, that'd be awesome. Can I play music? I mean, I can play music for myself. I just don't know if I can play it for you guys. I've had seven views in the last 28 days. Let's see where we get in a couple years. Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna play some lo-fi hip hop. All right, so hey, you're doing a great job. Great. All right, now I'm gonna try and find out where I am, because I have 100 different things open. TypeScript basics. I need to actually watch that. I need to finish this later. VS Code top 10 tips, Excel, W file. Your repo. I don't need that. Okay. All right. So looking at, and this is my dummy org. You have what's called the Lightning App Builder now. And what this is doing is this allows you to sort of build custom UI interfaces that include different components that are already included or aren't included yet. And this is how we get to sort of building custom components, right? But this allows you to do things with the Salesforce organization or the user interface, and start to use or get familiar with Lightning Web Components or Lightning Components. So let's build an app page real fast. And I'm going to call this one contact. I don't know. Let's come up with a scenario. So this is a scenario we're going to build on. So I'm going to build a page that is a tab that can be accessed by a tab that you would go to as a sales user, and you can manage your contact tiers, right? So let's say that you have a tier of so if a contact is a part of an account that is a customer, you can manage that contact tier. Actually, you know what? Let's do accounts. Let's do a page where account tier manager, right? So basically what this would do is we are going to build a component that allows you to see a list of accounts and their account tiers with a button that when you select an account would basically move the tier from one tier to another. So, all right, so that we can do that. Account tier manager. Account tiers. There you go. We'll just do that. Label. We only need one region. The reason being is because we're going to build a custom Lightning component that does this, sort of is the UI of it, but we only really need one region for that. I'm gonna hit finish. But what's really cool, and this is where I wanted to get to before we start building a custom Lightning component, is that if you notice, I can create, right? I can create, or I can add in different things here. So I could add in a report chart. I could add in rich text. You know, this is a placeholder for account tiers. I can't save. So what's really awesome about this is that this is bypassing the need to create or write any kind of code, write any kind of HTML file, CSS file. Doesn't need to have any JavaScript to it, just simply for the fact that it's text. Lightning scheduler, sales. We'll just add this one to the sales. Account tiers, save. And back. Cool. So now I'm going to open this up real fast. We're going to go to the sales application. You should see more account tiers, and boom, it shows you this is a placeholder for account tiers. I can also modify this directly from the page here. Edit the page. I can add in flows. I can add in list views, notifications, recent items, chatter feeds, dashboards, all of this stuff. These are standard components, standard web components. I've recently built a custom one called Hello World, where I can push this in, right? So what this is a custom component mixed in with a standard component, which is pretty awesome, right? But there are limitations here. I mean, you can sort of play around with these and see exactly what the capabilities are. You can get pretty awesome, you know, you can go through and do some pretty awesome things with this. So for instance, let's look at the account, and because I don't think that there's a tier level on here yet. Type, nope. So let's add a custom field just to track the tiers. It's going to be a pick list. Next, tier. I'm going to enter the values. So what would the values be? Basic. Enter. I don't know. So you have your basic customer or your basic account. You have your. Actually, you know what? Small. SMB, small, actually an SMB, commercial, authorized, premier, elite. All right, so you have an authorized customer, premier customer, elite customer. Cool. The type of account tier the customer account has. Help text required. This is not going to be required. Next. Going to give it to everybody. As an admin, you wouldn't want to do that. You also wouldn't want to just add it to every field, but I'm going to for now. Cool. So now we have an account tier field on our account object. I'm going to give it a default value. I'm going to authorize is going to be default here. So that way everything will default to authorized. And then I'm going to create a validation rule that says customer must have tier. Description, if an account equals type of customer, there must be a customer tier. All right, so this equates, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to do that for now. I'm not even going to do that right now. If we go back to the account now, I'm going to go back here, and let's look at accounts. Let's look at Dickinson Place, right? You see, is there a tier? Tier's right here. Cool. So let's change this tier. Let's change it to authorized. And now, all accounts. I'm going to change the fields display. I'm going to show the tier. And I'm going to change it. Boom, save. So the only account here is tier. I'm going to go through and I'm going to change a couple of these to, most of these to authorized actually. Change all these to authorized, update the 6 selected items, and apply. Save. So if you didn't know that, that's actually, this is the biggest reason why I use list views to do most of my work, simply for the fact that you can do mass updates with list views. That's pretty cool. Authorized. Actually, I'm going to do this one. Edge communications and jogger are going to be elite. Actually, I forgot. Edge and jogger going to be elite. Apply. Save. And the rest. And these aren't, I'm not going to go through, but these, I don't think these are all customers, right? Type customer. There you go. It's prospect. Prospect doesn't need to be one. None. Save. Sorry, that's like a data thing. I just get really technology partner. Express logic channel here. Premiere. Apply. Save. And jogger. Cool. Okay, so we have some accounts that have a tier included. And what we want to do first is, this is one way to create a page that would be considered a tab. And that would show you a list of accounts or whatever. Now, the functionality of adjusting or creating a button wouldn't do it, not just yet, but let's go ahead and create a new list view. New list view. So I'm going to do this account tiers. Accounts with tier. All right. All users can see this accounts with tier. And I'm going to filter this by tier not equal to blank. And I want to show all accounts. Hit save. All right, now I also want to select the fields to display because I don't care about account site. State I can leave. Actually, I don't care about a state. I do care about account owner alias. I actually don't care about either. But let's look at, we do want tier. That's for sure. Right. We'll put tier first, actually. Oh, account name not equal to blank. That's why. Tier not equal to blank. Hit done. Hit save. All right. So now we have a list view of account tiers. And if we go back to our page for account tiers, I can go through and I can edit this page. I'm going to get rid of this hello world because it's just an example that I use. And I'm going to pull in a list view here. On the account object, accounts with tier. We're going to do 20. Enable inline edit, hide list view action bar, hide search bar, boom, save. Back. All right, so now we've created an accounts with tier page, right? So whenever I go to this tab, it's going to pop up and show me the list view of accounts with tier. But if you remember, I wanted to be able to select one and then have a button that basically moves their tier from one tier to the next tier, right? And if they're elite, we can even have it kick back all the way to authorized. So we have used, up to this point, we have used declarative tools, right? So we've used the Lightning App Builder to build a new page. We've used list views with a custom field to build the list view, and obviously the tier is a custom field. We have used, again, the app page to display this information. But we're sort of getting to the point now where I got to build a custom button. And that button has to do something. And I also don't really want to like all this stuff right here. I don't even know if I want that. I don't know if, I mean, I could leave the list search and stuff, but in reality, I don't know if this is what I want to do, what I want. So Let me try something actually. Could I get rid of this page header? That would be awesome. Desktop. You can even add actions, which is pretty cool. New case, new contact. Set component visibility. Research components. Always show icons. Cool. So we don't really have many components that we could work from here. Now you could get some more on the App Exchange, but I'm not going to do that just yet because I want to learn how to build my own. All right. So what I would do now is that now that I know the declarative tools can't really fix or do what I want them to do, I'd look at building a custom Lightning component by scratch or from scratch. Now, over the past week, I've done a lot of research on this. Actually, I had to do a bunch of research on just Lightning Web Components in general because I didn't really know exactly what the details of them were. I'm eating hot Cheetos. These things are amazing. Before I get too far into this, I'm going to go make myself another drink. And I'll be right back. Maybe I should have a BRB screen. One second. I'm going to create a new thing, BRB. Be right back. I'm going to add text BRB. Create new. Okay. Create select source. What? All right. Can I do desktop audio? Properties, default, headphones. Okay. Here goes some music. Hopefully this doesn't get me kicked off YouTube. I'm living like there's no tomorrow. Actually, you know what? I gotta mute it. I don't know what the rules are. When somebody knows what the rules are eventually and watches this ever, let me know. It'd be awesome. I actually need to get rid of this crap too, because hold on, I'm gonna mute myself so that way I don't. All right. I just finished a voiceover for one of my intro to Salesforce videos. And even though I love this microphone, it doesn't have the best. This doesn't really create much of a pop filter to it. So one of these days I'll get a Shure SM7B. But anyways, we're just taking a quick break from Salesforce stuff. So here in another 5 minutes or so, then we'll get right back to building our Lightning Web component. All right. First of all, I'm going to try fixing this text. Create new. BRB right back. Okay. I don't want Arial. I want. Monster at. There you go. Regular bold. 48. Okay. Okay. Text transform. Okay. Actually, you know what I could do? I could just add it to here. I could. Check that out. Does that even work? Does it work on my face? All right. I'll be right back. All right. I know this is a super high quality stream. I'm sorry if you're getting distracted from your Saturday. Trying to find music that I can play for you guys before without getting kicked off YouTube. Whatever. If this whole video gets whatever. If this whole video gets all right. If I get muted, I'm gonna be so upset. But okay, don't know. This is so tempting. So tempting to just can't do it. All right, let's get into this. All right, so remember how I told? I don't need to be. You can get rid of this one. So I'll be right back. Mute that. So, as mentioned before, Visual Studio Code is where we would do our work, right? It's our IDE. GitHub is where we push our updates, sort of back up our code on a daily basis. If we're a solo developer, if we are working with a team, we would be backing up our code to GitHub using Git more often, right? We'd be branching off and doing things. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to build directly in my repository simply for the fact that I'm building in a dev org. And I'm not going to use, I'm not even using a Scratch org on this one, but eventually I got to get to the point where I'm familiar using a Scratch org. Now, let's write down exactly what we're trying to do here. I'm going to create a document. New brackets project. Get rid of this basic JS. What is this? Requirements. Okay. Oh, these Cheetos are getting to me. So these are our requirements. I'm going to actually... What's going on here? View. Can I zoom in? Whatever. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to write down my requirements. I need to create a data table, which is a list view in terms of development, right? So I need to have a data table that shows accounts and that have an account tier. I also need to be accessible from a tab. I need this table to be from a tab, and I want to create an action button that can move selected, not just one, but selected records from one tier to the next, right? So that can be our requirements here. And as we saw with with what we did here, right? This is accessible by a tab. It shows us, because we created a list view that has filters, it shows us only accounts have a tier. However, we can't build in, we don't have a button here that's going to create something, right? Now, I could build a button. I could just build a button, put it on here, that moves something from another one. But then, again, this wouldn't be a reusable component. The whole idea behind building the component is that I can reuse it in other areas of my org or whatever, right? So when looking at our requirements, I need to have a data table that shows accounts that have an account tier. So basically, from a developer perspective, I need to understand a couple of different things. I can create an Apex class that has a SOQL query on it that pulls accounts where tier is not equal to null into a list. So that provides me a referenceable list of accounts with the applicable with the applicable fields. So fields, that's a good idea. All right, so fields. I want to be able to see tier. So we'll do this account name, tier. We can do, I don't know, type, and let's see what else. Account name, tier, type. Industry, maybe. Okay. So I'm going to actually go through and change my list view on this to sort of match it. This is just so that I can think through the process of what exactly from a data perspective I'm pulling whenever I go to build these different things, right? So I'm going to do selected fields to display. We're going to move account name up, tier. We're going to just do move type up. I don't need phone, but I do want, let's see, industry here. Let's see. Cool. So then whenever I go back to the account tiers tab, I have account name, tier, type, industry. Awesome. Okay. So this is pretty much all the information I need to make sure that I'm managing my tiers correctly. Right. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. Notice a couple things here that Salesforce automatically does with a user interface, right? So there's padding between the components and the container, which is the page, basically, which shows you that there is some sort of CSS happening here. There's something telling this page to render, not to the far left and right of the screen. Now, what's really cool is that that's actually done automatically by the Lightning Design System, which we can reference and use in building our custom component. And again, I want to say I'm no expert here, but these are things that I'm learning as I go, and I hope that you guys are learning these as well, because it's proving to be sort of, new. All right, so we want to build this. We want to sort of replicate this with some additional functionality. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find what framework to work off of, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of research, and I'm going to go to my development Lightning Design System, and I'm going to also go to developer.salesforce.com, and I'm going to look at the component library. So the component library gives me the framework and the code to work with. The Lightning Design System gives me the classes or the CSS code to work with to make it do what we want to do and look how we want it to look. So first, I'm going to actually get rid of this, leave. That was just for an example. I think we're good here as well. Burlington Text Factory. Okay, so from a web component perspective, up here in the components for Lightning, there's a drop down. And these are all the different components that you could look at, like, that you could use to create something, right? So there's a button component. So again, if I wanted to create just a button, I could create a natural button or a neutral button here, right? So basic buttons, buttons with icons, all this other stuff. And this sort of shows me what, from an HTML and JavaScript perspective, I want the button to do, right? And I have no idea what just happened. Oh, that was actually, sorry, I'm getting hit up by. All right, so what's cool about these components is that they give you the basic HTML framework and the basic JavaScript framework to work on. If you remember, I told you Lightning components are actually they consist of 3 required files: HTML, JavaScript, and an actual XML file. CSS is optional, right? Which is actually pretty crazy, but CSS is optional, and you don't even need a CSS file if you're just going to reference the Lightning design system anyways, because that's naturally built into the standard of the Lightning design system framework. It's kind of confusing to wrap your head around, but basically you can reference styles of anything to the Lightning design system styles that allows Salesforce to manage how they look and feel. So if you want things to look and feel normal, natural, just like standard Salesforce information or standard Salesforce, you can do that. If you want to go full custom and build out your own components with your own backgrounds and your own text colors and all of that, like you can do that as well. So it really depends on what you want to do. But Salesforce makes it really easy with the Lightning design system to sort of standardize the way that your entire organization looks or your entire org looks, which honestly is actually a really good thing because you don't have to continually manage it, right? How many times have you gone to a website and you've seen that like the website in and of itself is just really outdated, right? If somebody else managed that stuff for you, it'd be super simple. All right. So to get something similar to this, it may take a little bit of exploration around the component library, but in reality, the first thing you're going to look for is a card. As you see here, a card consists of the header, an action item, well, basic card, right? There are different types of cards here, but the basic card consists of a header, an action item, the body of a card, and a footer. And to make it look similar to this, I would put this in a card, right? And actually, you know what? I'm going to show you something because this is probably the easiest way for you to understand sort of how this works. Man, the hot Cheetos are so good, but they get me. Right. All right. So we do card. Delete here. All right. So you have your card. Actually, you have your page. Your page is going to be, let's give this a background of yellow here. All right. Give your card a background of white. I'm going to do another text. This is going to be page. Do another. There you go. Boom. And this is going to be your card. Right. And then inside your card, you're going to have a list view. Right. You're going to have a list view. And on this list view, basically, is going to be a data table. Right. And I'll show you this here in a little bit, but there are a couple different ways you can go about this from a data table perspective. Data table. All right. So this is sort of how the website or the internet renders whatever you build. There's a page that is going to contain a card that is going to contain a data table, right? And so this is the card. The page is basic. The page is standard. That's what we don't need to do anything to develop or code a page. But what we're doing is the component is a card, and in that card is going to be another component, which is a data table. Right? And so the card component is going to be the parent component. The data table is going to be the child component. And, if we wanted to look at it like we could go as crazy as adding in sort of how this works. So this button is going to talk to the selected records here, which is going to update the card, which is going to basically update the selected record. So sort of how that works. But the way that this is going to work is we're going to build a card that has a data table inside of it that displays certain data. And to display certain data, we'd want to create an Apex class that sort of loops through our data, or we can reference like a JSON file if it's really just for testing. What that does is a JSON file is basically it's a JavaScript file that has a JSON style to it that basically is just standard data that you can use as an example. But because we want to actually reference a real org, I'm going to create an Apex class that has SQL code in it that just queries the database and puts certain types of data into a list that I can then reference later on down the road. I wish I had questions because that would be awesome, but I don't. I'm the only one watching my stream. Okay. Now, before we get to the point where we're building the query and we're building out everything, there's also one more tool that I really want to introduce you to. And this is something that we haven't really talked about too much, but this is probably one of the most powerful tools that you'll come across in the Lightning design system and the Lightning web component. This tool is called the Playground. And what this is a real-time website or a real-time UI rendering playground, right? You'll see that they give you some standard information. You have your CSS file, your HTML file, and your JavaScript file. It also comes with a child element. This is all just example data, okay? But what's really cool about this is that, say that I'm building something just as an idea, right? So I'm going to change this to my first LWC account ACC tier, right? Or actually, you know what? Account tier. And I've called this is, no, I haven't called this. This is called camel case. Camel case is whenever you use a lower case and uppercase without breaking it with spaces or anything. What's really cool is that if you'll notice here, first thing I'm going to do is create account tier folder. And in that folder, I'm going to create 3 documents. I'm going to create account tier.html. All 3 documents have to have the same parent name to them. Basically account tier with the same uppercase and lowercase. So with the same case styles. Account tier.js, right? And then I'm going to also create account tier.css. I do that. I don't know if I'm going to need a CSS file. I'm actually not going to need a CSS file for this one, but I do that just out of habit anyways. And if you notice, all of these basically have the same account tier naming nomenclature to them. That's extremely important because when you go to work with a Lightning web component, all of the files need to have the same names, or it's not going to work. Okay, so what we're actually going to do before we jump into our Visual Studio Code and start building the actual project here, we're going to test things out in the Playground, because the Playground allows you to save your progress, which is really awesome because then you can go back to it later or you can share it with other people. It allows you to run your program real time to see how it's going to work. It also allows you to download the code. And to be honest with you, I'm actually going to create one here. It's going to be sample data.js. And in the sample data.js, I'm going to, I have a file called sample data.js and another project that I'm going to reference. All right, so follow along. Export constant column definition seal it in equals. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm creating a data file so that way I can test what I actually build with data. When you go to build it in Visual Studio Code, you're not going to use this data file. All I'm doing is creating a sample set of columns with a sample set of records that are going to basically allow me to just, again, test things inside of the playground. This is super important because it sort of allows you to really see what your program is going to do before you get to the point where you're building your program or your Lightning Web Component, if you will. All right, so I'm going to create my columns. Now we remember the column requirements are right here, right? So account name, tier, type, and industry. So I'm going to build these columns out here. So I'm going to have type is going to be, we'll just do text. Field name. This is the actual field name, the API field name, which is going to be account name, maybe. This is just an example. Field name, account name, then we're going to do label. Account name. All right. So I'm going to copy this a couple times, 4 times actually. And if you're brand new to development, right? So code styling is actually very important to development because it allows people to easily understand what's going on, right? This basically allows people to see, where things fall in the hierarchy of code, which is important when you're trying to conceptualize the idea or the reason behind things. All right, field name. So this is going to be actually, whatever. I'm not worried about it. What else do we have? So we had field name, tier, type, industry. Account, tier. Account type. So we do type, and then account industry. When we go to reference actual data, it's going to be very different. But what this is doing is this is giving me the ability to create a very basic system of records to, whatever. Export constant key field equals name, actually, ID. We'll do ID. ID is generally, so what this is saying is that the key field to pull in the records, so the key is like the key to the group of field data, right? To reference for that particular instance of the record. It's kind of confusing, but when you start looking at a table, you'll understand, right? A table has rows of records. And if there are 5 rows of records, there are 5, if we look at it here, right? There are 9 records here. And I could use the key field being the account ID or the account name, which then will tell me exactly what data goes in these fields for that row of the record. So if I looked at this one, naturally, Lightning Web Components that are built in Salesforce or just out of the box or standard Lightning Web Components, I'm pretty sure they all use account IDs because they're never they're always constant, meaning that there's never two account IDs that are the same. You wouldn't want to use something like account name unless it's in sample data. It's just simply for the fact that your account name can always be, you can have multiple accounts with the same name. Now, that wouldn't be good because you'd have duplicate records, but technically you could. But you could never have multiple accounts with the same account ID. So if you use your ID, your account ID, as where did I just go? You know that if you use your account ID, you would be good here, right? So I think I'm playground. Yeah. I'm actually going to save this real quick. And then what's really cool is that when you save it, you'll notice that the URL changes, and you get a URL that's actually shareable. I'm going to put this on unidentified here. So what I did was I basically put my URL here, so I can always get back to this state if I want to. It's sort of like I just committed changes in Git to my GitHub repository, and now we're saving it into a new version, right? So that's sort of exactly what I did, but just using the playground. Okay, so we have some basic. So I basically told the system which columns, what I want the columns to be, right? These are all going to change later down the road, but again, I'm just building out sample data to work with, so that way, whenever I build my playground, I'll know exactly what to do. Ooh. Gosh, my neck just cracked. I haven't seen a chiropractor in so long, just simply for the fact that this whole coronavirus crap is just going crazy. I'd love to see a chiropractor. All right. Key field equals name or ID. I'm looking at a reference field for me. Expanded rows invalid. Okay. So I'm going to create another export constant, and this is going to be data equals name 45-1. Do this. Account name equals account 1. And then what else did we do? So we have account name, account tier equals, what were our tiers? Our tiers were authorized premier elite. I'm going to write that down in my notes field. All right. Equals authorized account type equals customer account. And if you notice, I'm using the field names here, not the labels. Account industry equals, I don't know, space. We'll do that. And then I'm going to close this out. So I'm going to create more records here. So this is just, again, sample data for, they cannot, the only thing is they cannot have the same name. That's extremely important to realize. Reason being is because if they have the same name, then there's no unique identifier for this system to recognize which ones to render in each field. So if you notice, I put a -1, I'm going to put a -2, I'm going to put a -3, -4, -5. And I'm going to put account 1, account 2, account 3, account 4, account 5. Authorized. We'll do premier. Premier, and then we'll do Elite. And then I'm just going to change these up a little bit. Technology, education. We'll do this. I don't really care. Consulting. All right, so we have so all this sample data JS is a very basic data. Actually, we'll do this name. Actually, I'm gonna change these ID. All this is a very basic customer, or it's a sample data. So this is in replacement of me querying the database to get an actual subset of data to work my component on. And if you notice the right, I'm not worrying about the. I'm not exactly sure why these are red. Oh, I didn't know why. Rip. I was about to say. Okay. So, again, these are just very basic sample data. Now we start to look at the actual card, right? And we know that we want it to be like similar to this, but with a button, and the button that has functionality to it. And before, again, we're not connecting to an actual org yet, so we're building everything in the playground, which is why I created sample data JS. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the HTML into the HTML here. And then I'm going to copy the JS, the JavaScript, into the JavaScript here. All right. We all need something. So this gives me some framework to sort of go off of. And to see where this framework is actually like to view it. So if you notice, the app up here is checkmarked as primary, main module, right? If I went ahead and checked this, you would see, now you get to see the render of this Lightning component so far. So I'm going to save this real quick. But what this does is, if I changed the Lightning component, the Lightning card title to account tiers, in real time, you get to see this account tiers piece happen right here. This Lightning button new slot. Lightning button right here is, basically the button over here, right? So I'm gonna call this one promote. Basically, we're promoting an account from one tier to the next. Slot actions, and it's missing a function here that actually tells you what the button does. We're not going to build that just yet, but just know that we need to add an on-click, right? So we need to add an on-click execute promote account. That's going to be an event. Promote. I'm trying not to like lay too many things into this into this video, right? But there are particular naming conventions that developers use that I'm learning about. Right? You have camel case, which generally is utilized to identify variables, objects, a couple different things. On click equals promote account. Maybe that's not right. we're actually going to remove this for now, but there you go. So there are general nomenclatures or naming conventions that people use. Camel case means that like the uppercase, lowercase without breaking into a space or using a space or a dash works. There's also the basically the understood. I'd have to think of the name of it. Web design naming conventions. I'm trying to think of the name of the naming conventions. Anyways, so there are multiple naming conventions that you have to understand, right? Actions generally are all lowercase. So like if you're calling an action, which is sort of like a method, but it's basically if you're calling an action, it's all lowercase. If you're calling a variable, it's generally uppercase or camel case. You have file names or names in general or camel case. Modifiers, they use I forget the name of the case, but basically they use a dash between the parent and child object, right? So like if I was modifying a class, I would use the parent class name, dash the modifier. So like for instance, if I was modifying, let's just say that, this is a class here, right? This div class SLDS top medium, SLDS bottom extra large. If you notice, actually, this is actually a really good example because I'll show you something. Right? So, hi. I'm going to actually take this, I'm going to put it here. So if you notice, this class SLDS dash M dash top lowercase medium. So this right here is basically the name of the class. The medium is a modifier, meaning that it's going to be medium. If I went and I did large, change, this is small. You notice how the small, and what that is I'm sure that's probably the padding on this particular class. If I just removed it, yep. So you notice the padding in here, medium. The padding gets bigger, right? So if you notice how the distance between the card body and the hay, or that whatever this is the high, right? Whenever I change this underscore large to small, the padding gets smaller. So what this is telling you, I can't remember the name of the naming convention here, but this is the dashes are going to tell you exactly sort of what this is. SLDS is going to be the Salesforce Lightning Design System dash M dash top, which is top padding, or I'm sure this is top padding or top margin. And then the small is the modifier. So top margin, small, top moderate, top margin, medium, top margin, large. Bottom margin, this is where it's saying, is extra large, right? So let's move this to small. Bottom dash bottom underscore small. If we got rid of this, boom. All right. X large, X small. Can I do that one? Bottom X dash small. So that sort of gives you an idea as to what these div classes are, or what these classes are. Again, these are the Lightning design system. These are naturally built in and you can actually reference these utilizing the Lightning design system. And this allows you to not have to create CSS and manage the look and feel, right? If you'll notice, there is no padding to the hello, right? Now, I could class equals, hi. And then I could go here in the CSS, right? And I could just type in .hi padding, 20%, right? And then what that would do is, ideally, I would have to change it up a little bit, actually. Equals 2px. Maybe not. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I need to do a little bit more research. But you get the idea, right? You get the idea that these div classes, and all of these are actually can come directly from the Lightning design system. Now that we know that we're using a card here, again, which is the ultimate layout here. So you have your account tiers with your button and then your body, as you'll see here, the P class card body, right? Card body. Custom component with a P. P just stands for paragraph. That just means you're using text. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked over here. So now what we want to do is we want to import a table, a data table, right? Because much like we see here, we're missing basically all of this, which is the data table. And looking through our Lightning Web Components, there's a bunch of different things that we can do, or tabs, tab sets, tree grid. Tree grid's probably the closest to this if you really want. This allows you to sort of look at additional child elements based on records. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to create a data table and see if that there is a Lightning design system, component blueprints, data table. And as you'll see here, this is basically what I want. I want to be able to see a data table. I just want a basic, very basic data table, right? And if I look at, so another thing that you probably should know about is that the Lightning design system comes with example data. That's just, so that way it can show you what's going on, right? It's going to show you different versions and different capabilities, rows with no hover, all that other stuff, headless, snowboards, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, I just want a basic data table. And if you notice, the code here is a little bit crazy because it includes, again, the TD is table data. That's the example data. So what I do generally is I create a new file in brackets or something like that. This is going to be table data LDS. And then I just go in here and I take a look at exactly what's going on. This is technically HTML. I do that so that way I can sort of visually see what's going on. But all I'm looking for are the table class, sort of the classes. And I'm not really looking at, the whole details of everything in here. Because this data label, contact amount, confidence, all other crap. But data table, which is cool. So now that I already, now that I have some sort of information as to what the data table code is supposed to look like, right? Then I can start to play around in my playground. Right. I'm going to leave this. This is actually I'm going to change this to where it says placeholder text. And I'm going to delete that. Get that on the same page. And now I have some room in between my Lightning button and my, promote. So I'm going to create an H1 tag. H1, and this is just going to say insert data table. Alrighty. And if you notice here on the right hand side, everything's just sort of changing as in real time. Our JavaScript we still haven't done anything with. We're going to need to start working on our JavaScript in a little bit, but I figure you can sort of, a lot of people actually work from the JavaScript and then go to the HTML. Which would make sense. If you really wanted to do that, good. If you notice here in the components reference, this is all tree grid. They have a sample data. They have an HTML system. This class, Lightning tree grid, columns equals grid columns, data equals grid data, key field equals key field. Lightning True Grid. A data table has a very similar framework, if you will. I'm actually going to copy this real quick, though, because this does need to go in my playground. So sample data. So basically, this is going to be CLMN and data. All right, from dot sample data. Cool. Syntax error. Root account tier sample data unexpected token. It's right there. Account. Huh. I'm trying to. So this is an example file that I've used before. I just want to make sure I'm not doing this wrong. That's why. Now that makes sense. Some people actually, they get really crazy with their code, and they will go through and line everything up for visual clarity, like that. I'm not going to do that in all of them, but man, I wish I knew what the whole music situation was with YouTube streaming, because then I'd let you listen to some of the music that I listen to if possible. Probably be easier if I had these built out previously, but I didn't. 2, 3. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting a compilation error or compile error. A lot of times they're due to commas or missing commas, but I don't know where this one's from. Again. account name, account tier, account type, account industry. It's a property. It's a string. A constant key field is ID. Okay. Unexpected token. Line 47, character 25. So 47. Account industry equals. That's why. Education. Boom. Okay, so our sample data isn't wrong anymore. Well, brother's texting me. Okay, I think we're good here. So what? All right. So just to give you an idea, sorry for the whole data thing. Maybe I can make this data JavaScript file available. But what I did here is this data JavaScript file is going to go away whenever we move over into the actual like Lightning Web development part, right? I'm not going to be referencing this data file because I'm going to be referencing realistic data. However, to make sure that in the playground we're building everything correctly, I am going to be referencing just fake data, right? And so I'm going to do that actually here. And so I had to build a data file in JavaScript. This is basically a JSON file. You notice that this export constant, this CLM in column, I'm telling the system, these are columns, okay? Type text, field name is going to be account name. The column name is going to be account name, column tier, column type, column industry. And then this is the data that's going to go into the columns, right? This is the row level data. And these are just example files. Nothing crazy. I would normally format the code. Actually, there's a really cool plugin for VS Code that sort of does this for you. But I would format the code in a way that people could read it relatively easily and provide some consistency to the styling of the code in and of itself. Just the more that you get into development, the more that formatted code becomes a pet peeve, or unformatted code becomes a pet peeve, if you will. And I don't want to start off with bad habits, so I'm going to waste time doing this for now. This is really just a habit builder. If you've ever been, or if you're an admin currently looking to get into the dev space, I highly recommend just leave a comment down below. That'd be awesome to sort of learn and find people that are in the same scenario or situation that I'm in. Maybe we could bounce ideas off each other and, collaborate, network, that type of stuff. Race. I'm a competitive dude, so racing people to get to certain skill sets is always something that I'm down for. All right, so basically all I did here is I just formatted the code, but we're pretty familiar with this. The CSS, I'm actually not going to do anything for, but I am going to save this update. We haven't really gotten any further than we were before, although we do have the HTML, we do have some JavaScript. here that sort of tells you what we're doing. There are a few decorators that you need to understand. Okay. You have 3 decorators, basically. In JavaScript, generally, you're going to have a public, private, global that allows a variable to be referenced outside of this particular instance of code. Right? So you'd have like a public or a private variable that would only be referenced inside of a particular method or whatever. That's a JavaScript. But with Salesforce, they've kind of gone away from that. They have a few different decorators that Lightning Web Components really use. Right? No decorator basically makes it private, meaning that if I was to go in here and just simply declare a variable, right? Data. That's a private variable. Okay. Sorry, I'm like munching right now. Now, I have the option of making this variable public, private, that influences rendering, or I can connect this to data, which is what we're going to do whenever we move over into Visual Studio Code. And to claim any of these decorators, I need to also add them into the import function, right? So I do know that I'm going to create, in the account here, I should create a public JS, which basically means I need to add in the API decorator. And I know I'm going to add in the track decorator. And what these allow me to do is API allows me to make a variable referenceable outside of the variable of the method or of the of this particular class. And that may come into play. I don't exactly know if I'm gonna just off the top of my head yet if I'm gonna make this outside variable referenceable outside of this class. I don't think I'm going to create a second component. I'm probably just gonna import the nest the component inside of the card. But track also allows me to track data. Right? So if I @tracked, I don't know if it's @track here. I guess it is. @track data, @track column. Actually, let's seal them in. Right? So what I'm basically saying here is that column and data are 2 variables that are being imported from sample data.js, which hold information necessary, right? Key field ID. @track error. We're going to get to that in a second. But I'm also tracking them, which allows me to, this is sort of confusing. So track means that I can render the UI real time based on this information, if I'm not mistaken, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong there. I can render the UI using track variables if I wanted to. So we're sort of prepped to get to the point where we can import account tiers, basically a data table, right? And so to do that, I'm going to find a reference code here for a second. Sorry. DevTools documents. There it is. It's not what I wanted. I have made so many repositories just trying to figure out what Git and GitHub did. It's biting me in the ass. Okay. Main default. I don't have any classes. All right, whatever. Let's look at some of this stuff. So lightning data table. So data equals data, column equals columns, key field equals ID, and honor action. Lightning dash data table. Okay. It's not what I want here. All right. Invalid HTML and syntax. Lightning data table. Okay. Placeholder text. Data equals data. Columns equals column. Key field equals ID. Okay, so let's go to the JavaScript. So data, column, key field equals ID. So we're creating a lightning data table where the data equals data, columns equals column, and ID equals ID. And I'm just doing this for future reference. Export default class. This is such a learning curve. missing something? Important column and data, track column data. Do I need to do that? Track error? I don't need to do that. Hmm. All right. Let's see if I can figure this out. So tier counts, error. I'm going to pull over error and data, which allows me to create an if statement. If data is there, I'm going to create data console log. Else if error. Still not showing data. I think it has to do with I honestly have no idea what's going on. Run. I'm not getting an error. It's just not loading the table data into the table. Data table. Data table lightning dash data table lightning dash data table. This would be awesome if I could just get rid of this crap. I'm not going to do that though. So data equates data. And I define data in here. Actually, you know what? I'm dumb. Data. No, data is defined. And it's tracked. You know what? It isn't. No, it isn't though. At track C11. I wonder what these little black lines are for. Don't need a CSS file on this one. Okay. What's going on? And I'm not there with you. placeholder text. Data table. Columns. Column. CLMN. CLMN. And CLMN. All right, so first of all, constant column. I'm just going to change the name of these. What the what's going on? Key dash field equals ID. It should be pulling in this information. Export data equals data for table, whatever, columns for table. Key field equals ID. Columns for table, data for table. Columns for table, data for table. Track, data for table, columns for table. If there is data, I'm gonna leave that there. Default class basic extends lightning element. Default class, so this is gonna be account tier accounts. Data for table, columns for table. I'm at a loss. I don't know what's going on. My lightning data table should be working. Data columns ID. Handle actions. There you go. Data, columns. Whatever. I'm just gonna adjust these. I don't even know why I changed these names. It's dumb. Key field equals ID. Constant key field equals ID. Import key field from track key field. Boom. And it's still not doing it. Shouldn't have to track key field. Actually, shouldn't have to track key field at all, but I do need to import the key field because it equals the ID. All right, I'm gonna take a break because I have no idea what's going on. But once I figure it out, I will come back and let you know, and we will move from testing into VS Code to build and reference AP Apex classes to pull data from an actual org. So, anyways, I hope so far this is helpful. You know, if it was, that'd be great. It's great. If not, I'm sorry. And I will be back later to finish this stuff up once I take a break and step away from it for a little bit. So, until next time, we will have a introduction to tools and building our first LWC part 2. Actually, not introduction to tools, but building our first LWC part 2. And I will check all of you. Well, none of you, but I'll be back. See you.